My name is Ellen Carter, and I'm 68 years old. The night I buried my brother's toy truck in the backyard, I made 2 promises. First, that I'd never tell anyone what really happened in that house. Second, that if I lived long enough to grow old, I'd make sure the world knew her name. This rusted little truck has sat in my dresser for 53 years, waiting for today, waiting for me to finally speak. Because what happened to us wasn't just cruelty. It was a slow, calculated erasure of 2 children who nobody wanted to see disappear. That woman didn't just hurt us. She made us invisible. And the most terrifying part, she did it all while the neighbors called her a saint, while my own father kissed her goodnight, while teachers praised her for keeping such a tidy home. But I remember the way the closet door would creak when she locked me inside for hours, the smell of bleach when she'd make us scrub our own bruises so the school nurse wouldn't see, the sound of my brother's muffled crying through the heating vents when she'd take him to the special room. And most of all, I remember the day we decided to fight back, the day that changed everything. This isn't just my story. It's every child who's ever been told to stay quiet, every victim who's been told they're lying, every person who's looked at a smiling face and known the monster hiding behind it. So listen close, because after 53 years of silence, I'm finally ready to tell the truth about what really happened in that house on Elm Street. Before I continue, comment, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. People called her the Angel of Elm Street, always baking pies for church socials, volunteering at the hospital, smiling that perfect smile that never reached her eyes. But angels don't keep a wooden paddle hanging by the kitchen door. They don't make children kneel on grains of rice until their knees bleed. They don't whisper, "Nobody wants you," in the dark when they think you're asleep. The worst part wasn't the beatings. It wasn't the hunger when she'd locked the pantry. It was how easily everyone believed her. Teachers praised how spotless our uniforms were. Neighbors complimented our perfect manners. Even our own father came home every night to kiss the top of her head before asking if we'd been good for her. But there was one person who saw through it, one person who noticed the way I'd flinch when she moved too fast, the way my brother's laughter had disappeared. And what that person did or didn't do would change everything. Because sometimes the greatest cruelty isn't what the monster does. It's what good people don't. This is the story of how we survived, how a rusted toy truck became our secret weapon, and how 2 forgotten children finally made the world see the truth. 3 days after they lowered Mama into the ground, Daddy brought her home in that same black dress she wore to the funeral. She smelled like rosewater and peppermints, her hands soft as she knelt down to our eye level. "I know I can never replace your mother," she said, brushing my brother's hair behind his ear, "but I promise to love you just as much." That night, she made chocolate cupcakes with rainbow sprinkles, the kind Mama used to make on birthdays. We ate them at the kitchen table, where Mama's empty chair still sat. Daddy smiled for the first time in weeks. My brother, only 5 years old with his front teeth missing, giggled when she let him lick the mixing bowl. I almost believed her when she tucked us in that night, almost let myself relax when she kissed my forehead like Mama used to. Then the bedroom door clicked shut. We heard her footsteps go downstairs, and then the smell. At first, I thought the house was on fire. I shook my brother awake, and we crept to the top of the stairs just in time to see her drop the last piece of Teddy into the fireplace. That ragged old bear had survived 3 years of my brother's love, only to burn in front of her smiling face while she hummed, "You are my sunshine." When she turned and saw us watching, she didn't stop smiling, just held a finger to her lips, the way you'd quiet a dog. "Tomorrow, we'll get you new toys," she whispered, "proper ones that don't smell like sickness." That's when I understood. This wasn't just about replacing Mama. This was about erasing her. And we were next. 2 weeks after Teddy burned, she brought home a porcelain doll for me and a shiny red fire truck for my brother. "These are for good children," she said, placing them high on the mantel where we could see but never touch. That night at supper, my brother knocked over his milk. The white pool spread across her clean tablecloth like an accusation. Her hand shot out so fast the glass was still rolling when she grabbed his wrist. "Ungrateful," she hissed, dragging him toward the hall closet. I followed, begging, promising to clean it up, offering to take the punishment instead. She paused just long enough to look me dead in the eyes. "You'll get your turn." The belt made a terrible sound, like a gunshot every time it cracked against his small back. He didn't scream, not once, just these awful, choked little whimpers like a puppy that's been kicked too many times. When she finally opened the closet door, he fell into my arms shaking, his face swollen from crying silently into his knees. She stood over us, calmly coiling the belt back into its perfect loop. "Discipline is love," she said, stroking my hair with her free hand. "One day you'll thank me for this." That night I lay awake listening to my brother's hitched breathing, tracing the raised welts on his arms with my fingertips. The porcelain doll watched us from the dresser, its glass eyes gleaming in the moonlight. I realized then we weren't children to her. We were problems to be solved. Mrs. Henderson from next door saw everything. Her kitchen window looked straight into ours. I'd catch her staring sometimes when the belt came out, her wrinkled hands frozen mid-knitting. One afternoon when she found me crying behind the tool shed, she pressed a peppermint into my palm and whispered, "Your stepmother's got a heavy hand, child." Then she patted my head and sent me back inside. At church, the ladies all admired how spotless our Sunday clothes were, how we never fidgeted in the pews. "You're raising such disciplined children," they'd gush, while I stood there with socks pulled up over fresh welts. The pastor once noticed my brother wincing when he hugged him after service. He gave us both extra cookies at coffee hour, then spent 20 minutes laughing with her about modern children being too soft. Even our teachers praised how quiet we were, how we never complained. When I fainted in class from hunger after 3 days locked in the basement, the school nurse called it low blood sugar and sent me home with a lollipop, right back to her. The worst was Daddy, coming home from work to kiss her cheek while we stood at attention like little soldiers. "They giving you trouble?" he'd ask, and she'd sigh about how hard she worked to civilize us. He'd ruffle our hair absent-mindedly, never noticing how we'd stiffen at his touch now. The belt hanging by the fridge didn't concern him. The locked pantry didn't make him ask questions. That's when I understood. Adults see what they choose to see, and most choose not to see at all. Winter of '73 was the coldest our town had seen in decades. The pipes froze solid, and the wind howled through the cracks in that old house, like it was trying to warn us about something. My brother had just turned 7. if you could call it a birthday. She'd celebrated by making him stand in the snow without a coat until he could recite all 10 commandments. When his lips turned blue, she dragged him inside by his ear and locked us both in the basement to thaw out our sinful pride. The concrete floor sucked the heat right from our bones. We huddled together under a single moth-eaten blanket, our breath making ghosts in the air. The only light came from a tiny, cobweb-covered window near the ceiling, just enough to watch the days pass. She slid a single slice of bread under the door each morning, always saying the same thing. When you're ready to repent, the food will get better. By the second day, my brother stopped crying, just stared at the basement stairs with hollow eyes, rocking back and forth. I tried everything, making up stories, playing tic-tac-toe in the dust, even singing Mama's lullabies until my voice cracked. Nothing worked. Then I remembered the toy truck, still hidden under my mattress upstairs, the one he'd managed to save from her purges. That's when I made the plan. On the third night, her footsteps paused outside the door longer than usual. The lock clicked open, and there she stood with a tray of steaming chicken soup. "Have you learned your lesson?" she asked. All sweet concern like this was some kind of test we'd failed. My brother's stomach growled so loud it echoed off the concrete walls. I watched his small hands tremble as he reached for the bowl, then deliberately let it slip through his fingers. The porcelain shattered against the floor, broth splashing her polished shoes. Her face went very still, that terrifying calm before the storm. "Back to your corners," she whispered. The door slammed shut, plunging us into darkness again. But this time, my brother squeezed my hand in the blackness. A silent message. He'd done it on purpose. The hunger had become a weapon, and for the first time in 2 years, I realized we weren't just surviving her anymore. We were fighting back. After the basement, nothing was the same. We moved through that house like ghosts, speaking only in touches and glances. I started noticing things. The way she left her keys on the hall table every Tuesday when she took her bath. The loose floorboard near the back door that never creaked. The exact minute Mrs. Henderson took her afternoon nap next door. Under my mattress, beneath the toy truck, I kept a notebook stolen from school. Page after page filled with shaky drawings. Maps of the house. Schedules of when Daddy would be at work. Lists of what we'd need. A can opener from the junk drawer. The wool blanket from the linen closet. Every penny I could steal from her purse when she wasn't looking, tucked into a sock under the floorboards. My brother's cough had gotten worse since the basement. Some nights it sounded like his lungs were tearing in half. When I pressed my ear to their bedroom door, I heard her tell Daddy it was just a summer cold. "Don't coddle him," she said, and I knew if we stayed much longer, he wouldn't survive another winter. The night before we left, I woke him with a finger to my lips. Moonlight through the curtains showed the bruises around his wrists, where she'd dragged him to the special room earlier. I opened my notebook to the last page, where I'd drawn a picture of Mama's sister's house 3 towns over. "Tomorrow," I whispered, tracing the route with my finger. His eyes got wide, but he didn't cry, just nodded and pressed his forehead to mine, the way we used to when we were smaller and the world made sense. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every creak of the house sounded like her footsteps. Every car passing might be Daddy coming home early. But when dawn finally came, Painting the room gray, I slipped the toy truck into my brother's hands. "Hold on to this," I told him. "And no matter what happens, keep running." Tuesday morning dawned rainy and thick with fog. Perfect cover. While she was in the bath, I moved like lightning. The can opener from the junk drawer, the sock full of change, the wool blanket rolled tight and tucked under my sweater. My brother waited by the back door, clutching that toy truck like a holy relic, his knuckles white around it. I could see his chest moving too fast under his thin pajama top. The loose floorboard didn't make a sound. The back gate squeaked a little, but the rain covered it. We ran, hunched over, through Mrs. Henderson's backyard, past her clothesline, where our school clothes flapped in the wind like ghosts waving goodbye. The bus station was 3 miles west, but I'd memorized every shortcut through the old apple orchard, across Miller's Creek, then along the train tracks until we hit Main Street. Halfway through the orchard, my brother started wheezing. I carried him piggyback until my arms shook, his bony legs clamped around my waist. The toy truck dug into my collarbone where he held it between us. "Just a little further," I kept whispering, but the creek was swollen from the rain, and we had to go around. That's when we heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel where no cars should be. We dove into the ditch as her station wagon crawled past, windshield wipers slapping like a metronome. She was driving slow, methodical, peering into the fog. My brother's cough threatened to burst out of him. I could feel it shaking his small body against mine. Then the brake lights flashed red in the mist. She'd stopped. The car door opened. White patent leather shoes hit the wet pavement. "Children," she called, sweet as Sunday school teacher, "you must be freezing out here." The way she said it made my blood turn to ice. She wasn't angry. She was excited, like a cat that's finally cornered the mice. My brother's fingers dug into my shoulders as the flashlight beam swept the ditch. That's when the toy truck slipped from his grip, landing with a splash in the muddy water. Her head snapped toward the sound. The flashlight found us, huddled together like scared rabbits. For one terrible second, nobody moved. Then she smiled. "There you are." Her white shoes squelched in the mud as she came toward us. That same sickly, sweet smile plastered across her face. "You poor, foolish children," she cooed, reaching out with manicured hands. "Did you really think you could run away from your own mother?" I tightened my grip on my brother, ready to bolt, but his wheezing had turned to something wet and dangerous. He couldn't run anymore. Just as her fingers brushed my arm, a screen door slammed. "Margaret," Miss Clara's voice cut through the rain like a knife. We all turned to see our elderly neighbor standing on her porch, hair in curlers, phone cord stretched taut through the doorway. "What in God's name are you doing out there with those children?" My stepmother's grip on my arm tightened painfully, but her voice stayed syrup sweet. "Just bringing my naughty little ones home, Clara. They thought it would be fun to play in the storm." She laughed that tinkling laugh that made adults nod approvingly, but Miss Clara didn't smile. She'd been our neighbor since before Mama died, the one who always left lemonade on her porch steps in summer, who taught me how to snap green beans on her porch swing. Miss Clara's eyes locked onto mine, then dropped to my brother's blue-tinged lips. "They don't look like they're playing, Margaret," she said slowly. The phone receiver dangled from her other hand, and I could just make out the tinny voice of the operator asking if she needed help. A car door slammed across the street. Then another. The Johnsons were peering out from their garage. Old Mr. Peterson had paused while walking his dog. For the first time ever, people were looking at us. Really looking. My stepmother felt it too. Her smile twitched. "We're fine," she said too loudly, yanking us toward the car. "Just a family matter." That's when my brother collapsed. 1 second he was standing. The next he was face down in the mud, his breath coming in awful, ragged gasps. I screamed his name, scrambling to turn him over, but my stepmother just stood there, frozen, her perfect outfit getting ruined in the rain. Miss Clara didn't hesitate. She came off that porch like a hurricane, nightgown flapping around her ankles. "You call an ambulance right now, Margaret," she barked, pressing 2 fingers to my brother's throat. Then softer, just for me, "It's going to be all right, baby." The next hours blurred together, flashing lights, strangers asking questions, the way my stepmother's smile finally cracked when the doctor said malnourishment and broken ribs and child protective services. But what I remember most is Miss Clara's knobby hand holding mine in the hospital waiting room, her whisper, "I should have done something sooner." Turns out she'd been keeping her own notebook. Dates, times, the bruises she'd seen through our kitchen window. That night, she didn't just call the police, she handed them everything. And this time, when they came to our house, they didn't just talk to the smiling woman in the doorway. They looked in the basement. They opened the locked closet. They found the belt and the rice bin and the journal where she documented every punishment. 2 police officers held her back as she thrashed like a wild animal, her perfect hair coming undone, her Sunday dress smeared with mud from where she tried to grab my brother back at the hospital. "They're lying," she shrieked, spit flying from her mouth. "Ungrateful, wicked children, after everything I've done for them." The neighbors had all come out now, huddled under umbrellas, their faces pale as they watched the woman they'd praised for years unravel before their eyes. Inside that house, the officers found what we'd lived with every day. The special closet with the lock on the outside, the belt hanging by its loop next to the fridge like some twisted kitchen utensil. The journal, God, that journal safe, with her neat cursive detailing every infraction and its corresponding correction. Page after page of our childhood reduced to a ledger of pain. June 3rd, boy cried during prayers, no supper. June 17th, girl talked back, Rice kneeling for 2 hours. But the worst discovery came from Daddy's toolbox. The officers pulled out a small tin he'd kept on the high shelf, the one we were never allowed to touch. Inside were Polaroids, dozens of them, pictures of us sleeping, pictures of us crying, pictures of the bruises and burns she'd carefully documented like some perverse scrapbook. The lead detective's hands shook as he flipped through them. "My God," he kept saying, "my God." At the station, they separated us for questioning. Through the thin walls, I could hear her alternating between screaming fits and eerie calm, telling them about our behavioral problems, about how difficult we were, how she'd only been trying to help. Then I heard a door slam and a new voice, Miss Clara's, saying the words that would change everything. I've been keeping records too. She'd documented everything, dates and times she'd heard screaming, the mornings she'd seen us doing hard labor in the yard instead of going to school, even samples of the food scraps she'd found in our trash can while our stepmother hosted garden parties with 3-tiered cakes, The final nail came when the hospital released my brother's full medical report. Old fractures, scar tissue, evidence of prolonged starvation. They said another week without treatment might have killed him. The last time I saw her, she was being led to a police car in handcuffs, her perfect dress wrinkled, her makeup streaked. For once, she wasn't smiling. The neighbors stood in silent rows along the sidewalk, some crying, some just staring in shock. Mrs. Henderson reached for my hand, but I pulled away. They'd all seen, they'd all known, and not one of them had stopped her until it was almost too late. After they took her away, the world didn't magically become kinder overnight. The first night at Aunt Sarah's, I woke screaming when she tried to tuck me in. Her hands coming toward me in the dark sent me right back to that closet. My brother wet the bed until he was 12, terrified of what might happen if he got up to use the bathroom at night. We'd both jump at the sound of belts being unbuckled, of high heels clicking on hardwood floors. The scars ran deeper than the visible ones. But Aunt Sarah, she understood in ways no one else could. She'd been Mama's baby sister, and when she hugged us, she smelled like Mama's perfume mixed with her own lavender soap. She let us sleep with the lights on. She never once raised her voice. And when the nightmares came, she'd sit between our beds, singing Mama's old lullabies until our breathing evened out. School was hard at first. We'd been kept home so often we were years behind. But my brother, he attacked math like it was a puzzle to solve. His brow furrowed in concentration, just like when we'd plan our escape. By high school, he was tutoring other kids, said it made him feel strong to help someone else for once. The Army gave him what we'd never had: structure with kindness, discipline without cruelty. When he shipped out for his first tour, I pressed that toy truck into his palm. "For luck," I said. He brought it back sand-scarred from the desert, with a new dent from where it had stopped a piece of shrapnel from hitting his leg. Now it sits on his mantle, right between his Purple Heart and a photo of his 3 kids at Disneyland. I found my calling in a 3rd grade classroom. My students don't know why I always keep snacks in my desk, why I never make a child stay after school alone, why I'm quick to believe when someone says they're hurting. They just know Ms. Ellen's room is safe. Last spring, a former student, now a social worker herself, brought me a dandelion in a juice glass. "You showed me how adults are supposed to act," she said. That meant more than any teaching award. As for her, the prison letters started coming after 5 years. Apologies at first, then excuses, then demands for forgiveness. I burned them unread. When the warden called to say she was dying, I hung up. The nurse who sat with her at the end told me she spent her final hours staring at the door, as if waiting for someone, anyone, to come. The hospital chaplain said she left instructions for her ashes to be scattered at sea. No marker, she'd insisted, like she knew no one would visit. Sometimes, when the house is too quiet, I take out Miss Clara's old notebook, run my fingers over her shaky handwriting, documenting all those coincidences she'd witnessed. The way she'd written Margaret's new dress next to Ellen's black eye, connected by a question mark in faded pencil, proof that someone had been paying attention after all. The toy truck stays where I can see it, not to dwell on the past, but to remember we made it out, we broke the cycle, and every time I hear my brother's kids laughing too loud at the dinner table, or see one of my students wave excitedly from across the playground, I know we won. All these years later, with my own hair gone gray and my brother's children grown, people still ask me why I tell this story. Why dig up such painful memories? Why not let the past stay buried? I'll tell you why. Because right now, as I sit in this rocking chair with my photo albums and my tea, there's a child somewhere listening to their stepmother's footsteps coming down the hall. There's a little girl counting the minutes until the closet door opens again. There's a boy pressing his face into a pillow so no one hears him cry. And maybe, just maybe, someone around them suspects something. Maybe a teacher notices how that child always wears long sleeves in summer. Maybe a neighbor hears yelling through thin walls. Maybe a relative thinks it's odd how quiet they've become, but they tell themselves it's not my business, or I might be wrong, or worst of all, someone else will speak up. Let me tell you something about voices. Mine shook the first time I told the principal about the rice. My brother's voice failed him completely when the police asked what happened in that special room. Miss Clara's hands trembled, holding that phone to call for help. But here's the miracle. Shaky voices still carry. Quiet truths still matter. And sometimes all it takes is one person breaking the silence for others to find their courage too. So if you see something, say something. Not tomorrow, not when you're sure, right now. That child doesn't have the luxury of waiting for perfect proof. Report it anonymously if you must. Send a letter. Make the call you hope is unnecessary. Better 1,000 false alarms than one more burial for a toy truck that should have been in a sandbox, not a grave. And if you're that child listening to footsteps right now, hear me. You are not alone. You are not crazy. This is not your fault. There are people who will believe you. I'll believe you. My brother will believe you. Every survivor who hears this story stands with you. The world is wider than that house, brighter than that darkness. Keep going, one breath, 1 minute, one step at a time, until one day, somehow, you find yourself free. That's why I tell this story, because silence is the weapon they count on, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is whisper, help. Because 53 years ago, someone finally listened. And that's all the reason I'll ever need. After all these years, I still keep this rusted toy truck where I can see it every day, not to remember the pain, but to remember our strength. To remember that even in our darkest hour, we found the courage to fight back. To remember that kindness exists in this world, in people like Miss Clara, like Aunt Sarah, like all of you listening right now. If this story touched your heart, do me a kindness. Leave a heart in the comments below so others know they're not alone. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've got little ones in your life, hold them extra close tonight. Not out of fear, but because every child deserves to know what safety feels like. This is my story, but it belongs to all of us now. Subscribe if you want to hear more voices like mine, because the world needs more truth tellers. And remember, my darlings, no matter how dark the night, morning always comes.